It's good to work on the press release well in advance before the public examination. Check out the instructions from the university library's website. You should also include a photograph of yourself in the press release. Consider the type of picture you would like to add. You don't have to wear the same outfit you'll be wearing during your defense. Instead, try to imagine what sort of impression the picture and the text regarding your research will convey. The library will notify the media about your public defense, but I recommend that you also actively post notifications on social media yourself. Furthermore, you can upload a video to an online platform which gives a brief description of your research. The video can also be accompanied by interests and arguments and quotes from your research. Then share the link in social media or part of your portfolio. Remember to use hashtags and do not forget to tag the Tampere University community, financiers and grant foundations and other relevant parties. The best press release is clear, concise, and memorable. A press release is not the same as the abstract of your doctoral dissertation. Try to think of it this way. A press release is written to convey information about the thesis and its findings to as many people as possible. A press release is intended for a wide audience, such as those who read the local newspaper in the morning. It's not unusual for journalists to copy paragraphs directly from your press release and publish your sentences word to word. And that's why I recommend that you make your text so clear and convincing that it could be a news article as such. Most journalists are extremely busy, so for them, a good press release is one in which each paragraph introduces one important idea. One paragraph can, for example, describe the research purpose and its importance. The release should also contain a paragraph that begins with the words, "The researcher discovered that." This paragraph should present the main analysis or findings in easily understandable terms. You can also write your press release as if you were interviewed for it. You can include some of your best quotes. The majority of men in my study stated that they speak to their closest friends about challenges in their lives, and therefore the results do not support the myth of a silent Finnish man, the researcher says. Oftentimes, journalists will call you or approach you via email and ask to interview you for more information. Because of all of this, I recommend that you leave room in your calendar before your public examination. When the press reaches the media and your institution's website, there may be your number of contacts made by the press. And this, of course, feels kind of rewarding. You will have the chance to explain your findings, and in that way, you will draw the public's attention to an important topic. Before you issue a press release, you should decide on the core message you wish your audience around the country or the world will receive regarding your thesis. This preparation will take time, but it's well worth it. That's why you should prioritize this and allocate plenty of time to write it. Or before appearing in an audiovisual media like TV interviews, it also pays off to practice. If you have a sense that you've been studying a subject that is important but not likely to attract wide attention from the media, several outcomes are still possible. Anything can happen in the world just before your public defense, and a fresh expert, such as yourself, will be asked to comment on the events. Or you can make the subject matter of your study highly attractive and interesting by providing examples and linking your findings to actual human experiences. The working pace in newsrooms is hectic, and when a journalist calls you, they may want to publish the story that very day. You have the right to check that you have been quoted accurately. You and the journalist are likely to be sharing the same goal: to produce a news item, a story that will attract a large number of readers or viewers and inspire dynamic debate pertaining to social affairs or your own specific field. And that's why it pays off to be fast and flexible and work together with the journalist. Request an estimate of when they will send you the story for you to read through before it's published, and promise to provide them with comments in a timely fashion. And do not break this promise. Here are my top tips for a functional press release. Capture your audience with the title. A press release is news. Avoid using the title of your thesis as the title of your press release. Instead, consider the arguments you could make based on your research. For example, the title of my thesis was Supportive Communication in Finnish Men's Friendships. But the title of the press release should preferably reflect the end result, which will spur the journalists' and readers' interest. For example, Finnish men do provide emotional support in close friendships. When planning a press release, think of it as a story that you yourself would like to read, and one that could find their way in newspapers. This means avoiding the passive voice and long sentences, but instead you should adopt a style favoring short independent clauses. Avoid non-finite clauses and get rid of all the scientific jargon from your text. If you do need to use scientific terms, explain the terms to your readers. Try to think of synonyms or an example that you can use to illustrate the information you're trying to convey. What type of reality can a potential reader identify with and relate to? 1 page is a suitable length for a press release. Of course, it depends on the topic. You have to accept the fact that you will have to simplify things, and therefore you should select a set of main points that you want to include. As I mentioned before, the language you use should be clear with concrete examples, including your findings. You will not be able to include everything in your press release, so step into your reader's shoes. What would they be most interested in hearing about? Do not hesitate to ask for help from people outside of the academic world, such as family and friends. The best way to prepare to communicate your findings and defend your dissertation is to explain the study you have conducted in layman's terms. By answering people's questions, you can discover the elements you should include in your press release. You should also carefully consider the recipients' different audiences, readers or watchers or viewers with varying backgrounds, different ways that your text can be interpreted, and the debate that your research is participating in. Certain topics can be popular in that particular temporal and social context. If you write your press release carefully and also consider the possible counter-arguments and questions that readers might pose, you can have the upper hand. In other words, do not overlook the social context of your research topic. Adding this context will make your study, and therefore also the press release, more interesting and relevant now. If there has recently been something in the news that relates to your theme, you can refer to it and underscore the significance of your own findings. Remember to include your contact information in the press release, but do pay attention to protecting your privacy. Would you like your phone number to end up online? Or which email address would you like to use for potential inquiries? It's important that you can be reached, so do take that into account when deciding on the amount of personal information you want to share. And finally, be prepared to discuss your research topic on social media and in traditional media. Take Twitter, for example. You can tweet about your research, provide a link to the website where people can read your thesis, and advertise your public examination. But please note that users of Twitter are encouraged to interact with their followers. And this means that you should be prepared to give explanations regarding your research, reply to other people's tweets and questions, and participate in any debates with constructive and comprehensive arguments. Public debates and media visibility provide clear benefits for future employment, among other things. Requests for comments, expert lectures, and perhaps even work opportunities may result from your active self-promotion. Well, in addition to your research, those who interview you may ask you about other themes. And this applies to interviews conducted for audiovisual media, podcasts, radio, and the like. Practice such situations beforehand and out loud at home. Yes, I'm encouraging you to talk to yourself and role play as if you were being interviewed. You only have as much time to think before answering as you would in any other context of natural interaction. Watch my separate video on this topic. And lastly, a tip on how to kill two, or in this case, three birds with one stone. You can utilize your press release when writing your introductory lecture, the Lectio Praecursoria, because you have already identified the core ideas in your research when writing the abstract for your thesis and the press release. Get more tips on how to write and give your introductory lecture by watching the related video. Let your passion shine through. Science is allowed to be infectious, and you, as someone who worked really hard for the results, should enjoy the limelight. Traditional media such as radio and TV emphasize the significance of nonverbal communication. The ability to be concise, as well as having an expressive voice and gestures, are a plus. Be an active participant, and when interacting in a group, remember to listen to others and use gestures and facial expressions to show that you are doing so. Communicate openness and positivity with your eyes. And when it comes to communication, practice makes perfect. The best form of practice and preparation for interviews is to rehearse for them out loud. It will also help you if you can get one of your colleagues, for example, to play the role of a journalist and ask you questions about your study. Another great option is to practice on your friends, family, or even a taxi driver, telling them about your work and research. When they ask you questions, pay attention to the words they use to understand what you said, and also on the way you express yourself. Try to remember the most effective ways of describing your study and findings. You should also use memorable examples, drawing comparisons between your findings and everyday occurrences. Take advantage of metaphors and mental images. Sometimes even a proverb can be used to highlight your conclusion. The methods I have suggested before work because they help people remember what you have told them, and people can also utilize these same methods to tell others about your research. Using a narrative method is a very natural way of conveying information, and therefore the information will be easy to absorb. If you just provide an abstract summary of your main findings, it is much harder to relate to, and therefore they may be difficult to repeat to others. Also, a word of warning. Pay attention to the political and historical connotations of the examples and metaphors you use. In order to avoid evoking unwanted images, you should think about this beforehand. Again, you should practice aloud and imagine that you're taking part in a podcast or giving an interview for audiovisual media. When you practice your answers by yourself, you can be your own critical listener. And this is an effective way of preparing for the communicational tasks that are connected to your doctoral dissertation. You will also be rewarded for your efforts. You'll be able to utilize your research for a long time to come, several years even, and every public speaking occasion increases your self-confidence and the effectiveness of your message. You should remain aware that you may be asked about a whole range of topics if an interviewer gets excited. And this is a form of positive feedback. You are seen as an expert who can provide answers to questions on a number of things. The interviewer represents the viewers and the listeners, relaying their questions to you. This comes down to the importance of recognition. News stories are short-lived. Today's hot topics will be forgotten by tomorrow. And it pays off to take advantage of any opportunities for social impact and promotion of positive development while you have the chance. And that is why you shouldn't avoid answering questions by saying that you haven't studied the exact thing they're asking and therefore cannot comment on it. During your training as a researcher, you have read a vast amount of literature and can discuss a great number of topics based on what you have read. You can say, for example, that in my own research, I studied the effects of bronchitis on children's lungs, but naturally, studies have also been conducted on bronchitis suffered by adults. For example, Professor Margaret Hawke and her research team have discovered that adults, and so on. If you A, answer a question, and B, give recognition to other researchers, you strengthen the role of science in society. You help people realize the importance of science, and last but not least, you solidify your own status as an expert. When you mention names of other researchers and acknowledge their efforts, you give an even better impression of yourself, not worse. In connection to this, if you conducted your research as part of a larger group of researchers, with large quantities of material on which several doctoral dissertations will be or have been based, I would recommend that you spend some time considering your choices of wording, starting with the pronouns. And this tip also applied to your public defense. You and the other members of your research team have co-published work, which means that you should give credit to your team too. Remember, however, that your findings are your findings, even if you wrote your doctoral dissertation as part of a team. Without your contributions, these findings would not be available now, and therefore plan ahead the type of recognition you wish to give to the other members of your team and to yourself as the author of your dissertation. The more natural and at ease you appear during the interaction, the more likely various media channels will be to ask for your opinion and comments in the future. When it comes to interviews, practice and fearless participation will pay off and improve your communication competence in various situations. So don't hesitate to take part in public debate.